Riot Games has just announced the format change for 2016, which will actually only come into action for the summer split. So the spring split will be the same. It will be best of one, presumably a similar kind of breakdown over the week. But for the summer split in both NA and EU, we have a total format change in terms of how it's broadcast and the rule set that we're using. So in the past, LCS, at least last year, was best of one. And what will happen now is North American LCS will change to best of three, and the EU LCS will change to best of two. On top of that, there'll be a change in terms of how they're broadcast, which is in the EU LCS, it will only be on 2 days, which I think were, let me see, I think it's Saturday and Sunday. I forget, I didn't notice that. And the idea is games will be split over 2 streams, so they'll be happening simultaneously, so you can choose which game you want to watch. And for NA, it will be over 3 days, with Friday being on 1 stream with the best of threes, and then Saturday and Sunday also their best of threes, just as the best of twos were in Europe, will be split over 2 streams with simultaneous games. So a lot to discuss here. First and foremost, when I first saw the factor that they said it's only going to be introduced for the summer split, with the spring split being the same, even though it's not that big a deal, I do want to just point out that a minor issue already there is that presumably we'll have a similar system from before where you gain circuit points to qualify for Worlds throughout the 2 splits you compete in. So it's already a bit weird that you can compete in the spring split with a totally different format, gain points which could potentially get you into Worlds, and the summer split will be totally different and teams will compete there differently. So that in itself is a little bit weird. Not sure I think that's such a great idea, but whatever. This is a better system than using best of one for both splits, so in that sense, I guess that's a compromise that they have to accept, assuming we accept the premise that they couldn't change over in time for now. Like, it does seem a bit last minute to be doing this. Why couldn't this be in progress so that everything you had a few months before LCS, then do it for spring split? But whatever, be that as it may, now let's discuss this topic. Now, in the post where they announced all of this, I have to say, this is a classic Riot Games post. Go and read this post if you want the kind of tone and the nature of how Riot always speaks to the community. Because what they do is, whenever they change something, they'll always present it as if it was almost like a light bulb went off in their head. They got a brand new idea. They've just realized, all of a sudden, everyone simultaneously realized that the old way of doing things wasn't ideal, that there's a better way out there. But at all times, you never fully acknowledge that the old way ever could have been different or that it was a mistake to go that way. You always have to, in some way, big it up that it was the right way to do it at the time. And now, God's revealed a new truth to us in this new book of whatever it would be called, the new Riot manual, and so this is the new way we're going to do things, and of course is the way it always should be from now on, but before it makes entirely perfect sense that it was the same way as before, even though all the formats we ever talk about in LCS, in terms of leagues, in terms of how you structure a match, in terms of how you have how many teams you have in a league, in terms of how you do relegations, in terms of how you do promotions, in terms of how you do playoff seedings, in terms of how you take circuit points, every single one of these details not only has existed elsewhere in esports and been done better in many occasions, now you won't see it as much because they've gotten closer to what was done better in the past, or has existed in other sports and competitive games and disciplines for decades, if not years and years before Riot Games ever did it. So the reason why I bring that up and emphasize that is because the manner they talk is always so self-congratulatory, it's hilarious. So I'll read out this paragraph here that really highlights it. Every season, we actively look at the LCS format and schedule to see how well it's meeting our goal of creating highly competitive and extremely entertaining matches. For the 2015 season, it led to changes like eliminating Super Weeks and extending playoffs over multiple weeks rather than one jam-packed weekend. Now, what's great about that is, again, we're only talking about, what was it, just over a year ago now, when they had these issues where they had the Super Weeks and all the rest of this garbage, and yet that never needed to be there. You could have already told them at day one of LCS, as I did, by the way, that like Super Weeks are a bad idea. How a team's going to prep for that, and you're going to get a lot of wacky results due to it. Whereas in Korea, they have a whole week to prep for specific opponents that they know they're playing at a certain time, etc., etc. The idea they even say here, like jam-packed weekend of playoffs, well, I could have told you again that that's not such a good idea. It's okay in a LAN back in the day, but if you're trying to make a whole league out of it, it doesn't make sense to have a 2.5-month league and then have the finals all take place on one weekend and people playing so that they only know, oh, tomorrow I play another team in the next match and they only have a night to prepare. So again, these aren't things that were suddenly discovered to be different now. These were already ineffective inefficient ways of doing those particular formats compared to what's available, and now they've changed to a better format. Yes, well done, clap, clap, clap. But don't then congratulate yourself on realizing that the other system wasn't very good. Everyone said it wasn't very good. I don't know anyone who thought it was a good system. In fact, what's funny is I went on an episode of Whose League Is It Anyway with Travis back in, I think it would have probably been like 2013 or something crazy. Yeah, it must have been 2013. And I even said at that point in time, a lot of the issues of that, some of these things that are going on here, or at least I highlighted problems with their format even back then. It's just taken years for Riot to fix it, because to fix it immediately would somehow, apparently in their world, maybe involve like admitting you did it the wrong way, or say, oh, you know, we changed our philosophy. No, it always has to be that they were never wrong, but now they're even more right. Like, okay, whatever, mate. I guess you just win in every scenario. Here's another great one. Looking back, showcasing every team on each day was an important part of growing the league from its infancy, when team brands weren't nearly as strong as they are today. This is them congratulating themselves for having used Best of War in the past, by the way. I mean, who knows what that even means? Like, so showing the teams every day helped grow those brands, right? What brands? Think about the teams that were back in LCS in the first split. What? Velocity, season rather. Velocity. We've got all sorts of teams that don't even fucking exist and aren't even in LCS anymore. Those brands haven't grown particularly. They've grown because League of Legends, the game's gotten bigger, and they've been in LCS, yes. Best of One wasn't some mega format that grew them better, though. Because in that case, what? You don't care about growing brands anymore nowadays? What? Brand new people like Immortals just got into the league and they're not going to get to grow their brands? No, this is nonsense. This is just self-congratulatory bullshit again. And again, this is like a couple of years ago. It's not 10 years ago they're talking about when they did something amazing. How much has possibly changed in like a year or 2 years? So yeah, classic Riot there. Got that out of the way. Now we're on to the actual stuff. So NA gets best of 3 format. Now, of the options available, if I really had to pick, yeah, I probably do think best of 3 is the best format. I mean, first of all, it does have a minor issue, which is then you get the side advantage. It also does take more time, but I think it's way better for competition because it simulates what the proper kind of competition between these teams should be. You can't just cheese someone. You play, you have to win at least 2 out of the 3, so there's a chance to come back and there's a chance to adapt to what they've done. I don't think it is. I never understood the logic that it spoiled playoffs, because the reason why in League of Legends, especially as a unique game, it doesn't spoil playoffs is because the season lasts 2.5 months. So the team that you play in week 1, that won't be anything like the match you play, even if you had played them in a best of 3, which hopefully you won't ever again, if you'd played them in the playoffs, because obviously it used to be best of 3 format right up until the final in LCS. So if you'd have played them in the semi-finals of LCS, but you'd also play them on week 2 in a best of 3, those would be 2 totally different best of 3s. You'd have learned so much about the meta since then. The meta itself might have changed with patches, so champions are totally different. It would only build up some of the hype for it. It would have no negative impact on the playoff match. You'd never go, I don't think I'll watch that semi-final, because I saw those 2 teams play 2.5 months ago in a match that actually was fairly inconsequential. Like, no one would ever say that. So I never understood that logic. So for me, it's better. You just get to see them more. They get to polish their playoff shape up. You get to see who's good in series and get a sense of how they adapt in series, how teams play, so that they're not just playing one freak game and then they go away. They play one game, then they have to play another game. Now let's see if they can keep that up. Can they continue what they did there? Can they do as well as they did in the first game? Can they turn it around? All sorts of great advantages. So if I had to pick a format, I would probably pick best of 3. I mean, personally, watch out, guys, I wouldn't pick a league format. But I think we all should know that by now if you watched any of my shit. I'm not a big fan of leagues. But within the context that we have to have a league, I like best of 3. I liked watching them in LCK. I thought it was the best league to watch. I have to say, though, people often say a disadvantage, which to a degree is a disadvantage, is that you have to watch the bad teams play best of 3s. Well, the bad teams will play best of 3s, I assure you. And if you're someone who, certainly I agree rather, if you're someone who has to watch every LCS game, yes, you're going to watch a lot more crap, boring games. Now, the part I never understood is, you don't have to watch those games, mate. Like, you can just tune out anytime you want. If you like one really good team, think of the other end of the same logic. You get to watch the good teams, play more games against each other, and have more good games. So I've got a tip for you. It's a tip for life, actually. When you see something you don't think's very good, I wouldn't waste any time with it, mate. If you see something that's good, though, I'd invest a lot of your time into that. As a result, you'll spend a lot of your time doing and enjoying things that are good, not very much time on things that are bad. So take that and apply it to sports and esports now. Just watch the teams that are good, play each other in the good games. Don't bother watching the games that are crap. Same as I did in Korea. I didn't watch it when Spenu played Anarchy. What the fuck do I care? If I'd look at the scores after the fact, and if someone had a crazy game, maybe I'd go back and watch that one game. I'm not going to waste my time watching that match. Meanwhile, if Ku plays Najin, yeah, I'm all in there. I've got my popcorn. Now I get to watch a series, not just a best of one. And what would happen if... Oh, that's right, yeah, the format means best of one, so I guess I don't get to see him for 5 more weeks. This is a way better system. Now, in terms of Europe getting best of twos, okay, so first of all, a good thing about best of two, it's better than best of one. So immediately there, we've got to give Riot a thumbs up. It's better than what they formerly had, ignoring all that bullshit, eschewing all that nonsense about growing the brands and synergy and corporate, like all like middle management buzzwords that they got out of that fucking business magazine. I'm a businessman now. So it evens out the side advantage. That's good. It's not as good as determining a winner, obviously, because you can have a 1-1 tie. I mean, you obviously can have a 2-0, which makes it look even better in a way, because winning 2 out of 2 is better than winning 2 out of 3 in a sense. But you're going to get a lot more ties. Now, immediately, I have to go back into a little bit of a Riot thing and say, when they explained the reason as to why NA has best of 3 and why Europe has best of 2. What's funny is they never went to analogies about China and Korea. China was using best of 2 formerly. LCK was using best of 3. They never went to any analogies there, explain how those had worked or interesting things. They just went, classic Riot again, to a straight up hard sports analogy, which then didn't really contain that much actual depth in terms of the real reasoning or the merits behind it. Like they essentially just suggested, here's what they said about best of 2 in Europe. Given the prevalence of best of 2 in many European sports leagues, parentheses, specifically soccer, football, parentheses, we decided to implement best of 2 format in a region where ties are both understood and accepted in sports culture. Now, this is a classic Riot thing. Usually they do it on the NA side of things, and they'll usually compare it to American football there, and that's like the biggest sport or whatever in America, and so that's always like the god that they bow before. So they'll always reference that, and again, they don't tend to argue the merits of what this format would do for the game League of Legends and the eSport League of Legends. They'll just make a general thing along the lines of, well, in sports they do it this way within this region, therefore eSports in this region should do it that way as well. Like, there usually isn't that much connection between it. So they've suggested here that best of 2 is prevalent in many European sports leagues. Now, what's confusing here is I noticed some people on Twitter, even some European players, thought by this, because it's not very well explained, that Riot were arguing that using halves in a game of football was the best of 2, which obviously wouldn't make sense, because if you score 6 goals in the first half, and then the other guy scores 2 in the second half, you win 6-2. It's not a tie. You don't go, well, I won a half, and you won a half. Ties are accepted in our culture of the city of Europe, and therefore it's all A-okay. No. Presumably, I can only guess, they're talking about best of 2 in, for example, like European Champions League type formats where we have a home and away format. Now, first of all, that's designed, as I just said there, for home and away. So you don't get the advantage, kind of like a side advantage, of playing one game at my ground, where I'm Manchester United, and they have an insane record of winning on the home turf, partly due to the crowd atmosphere and people playing away from the home and the culture that they built within their team. No, we get to play one at Manchester United ground and one at the other team's ground. That evens it out in that sense. And both teams earn the revenue of the things there. That has nothing to do, you'll notice, with what a best of 3 format's like, the merits of best of 1, the merits of best of 2. Not only that, it isn't a best of 2 because it doesn't actually work that way. Again, you score goals in both games in these particular games, and then we figure out an aggregate score. There's never a tie of 2 particular games in that way. So it's quite weird. I don't really understand what they mean by ties being acceptable because of best of 2. We have ties in best of 1 formats, such as a football game. You can have a tie in it. I can assume it's not some sort of a playoff game because then we can have penalties and extra time. So again, it feels like they actually don't really understand soccer as far as I can tell. Football, as we call it in Europe. Which in itself is a bit confusing as to why they would pick this as an example. Again, I would just eschew the sports analogies and explain why you think for Europeans the merits of best of 2 would be good. Then maybe European would be like, oh, you've got some good points. I mean, I explained some of the merits myself. So I'd eventually say, I mean, they're going to admit to that, like, it's fucking right. No, our game is perfectly balanced. But you can see there's an issue going on here, and it's a regular one. Whereas the implication was, in America, I think they said as much, they don't like ties as much, even though hockey had ties for a long time. You can technically have ties in American football. So as a result, in some sports, basketball, now hockey, etc., obviously, yeah, you have overtime, you have penalty type scenarios in hockey. So, in theory, North Americans aren't as willing to accept ties. Again, I don't really understand that, because what would it have to do with North Americans accepting things in a brand new thing that's not a sport, it's an esport, and it's for a new generation who don't come from an old tradition of sports, and you're supposed to be picking things that have merit to your game. The reason why this is so weird to me is that still in 2016, well, it's 2015 technically, but they're going to be going into 2016, Riot's still using this weird thing where they almost do just say, you say to them, like, why did you do that? And it's like, sports. Wouldn't know why did you do it? Yeah, sports do it. No, but why did you do it? Sports are doing it. Like, I mean, here's how an imaginary scenario, okay, of a fan trying to talk to Riot to get some reasoning as to what's going on here in this scenario. Okay, so you're gonna have to imagine that when I'm faced this way, I'm the fan, and when I'm faced this way, I'm Rito Man, Mr. Riot, whatever his name is. Mr. Allenson, whatever his name is. So this way is the fan, remember? So it'd be like, I have a few questions about this format, Rito Man. NBA. Yeah, but what about the NBA? Like, why would the NBA format be like that? Well, American people like to watch the NBA, and the NBA doesn't have ties. Therefore, our voodoo shamans, I mean league operatives, feel like the American people will like to watch games without ties. But what about the Europeans then? Soccer? What? I mean football. I know. Yeah, but what about soccer? What about football? In soccer, you can have ties, and European people like soccer for reasons we can't quite understand, and so we will have ties possible in the upcoming season of LCS for Europeans. There you go. Congrats, Europeans. Enjoy. We understand your culture. We have come to liberate you. Will you be making any other changes? Glad you asked. Yes, we plan to also cross our fingers, yell jinx, and pray to a newly erected shrine to our god at Riot, Stern Goodman. Who the fuck is Stern Goodman? Oh, he's an amalgamation of Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, David Stern, longtime NBA commissioner, and Gary Bettman, NHL commissioner. You see, it's our feeling that if we can somehow superstitiously copy the way real sports do things, then we will accomplish similar success to real sports through sympathetic folk magic, actually. But aren't those real sports completely different kinds of games with different physical demands and formats based on reasoning decades old, specific to those sports and cultures? Away with you, heretic! Away with you. You will not speak against the religion of sports here at Rito Central. Be gone! So yeah, I mean, that's obviously not actually real. That was actually just me acting. It was a one-man play. Me in Rito Man discusses the voodoo power of the LCS changes of 2016. So the reason why I bring that point up, though, is I don't understand, especially for soccer, why you would be citing this as something that like Europeans like or don't like. I mean, what choice did European people have over how soccer's done, by the way? Soccer has mainly been like that. Fuck it, I'm calling it football. Football's mainly been run like that because it has a mega old tradition. In fact, I'd say some of the rules and the way that they structure football now aren't fit for today. The people who make the decisions are a million miles removed from the average person who watches the game and from the players themselves. They make decisions that these players don't understand. So I would say it's not fit for today because it was designed decades, hundreds of years ago. A lot of these systems and reasons for doing so. Like I said, the home and away thing. Also, there's the fact that it's a fucking physical sport. It has physical demands upon you. You can only play so many games. You couldn't play a best of 3 against everyone. You'd be bodied. Some people can barely play a full game at full strength. Some people wane a bit towards the end and you bring in a sob every now and then, etc. Likewise, we have like a yellow card system in football. If you were playing mad best of 3s in every series, people would be getting so many yellow cards and be out of games all the time, and you'd not be having to have full 11 in for the proper matches that you want. So there's all these specific things. Are you getting the logic here, guys? There's things that are specific to football as a sport and a game and a sport and a cultural sport that are only specific there once you explain the merits within football. When you want to make something within esports, you have to look at the merits of the thing in esports applied to your exact teams now in this era and in this culture, and then you have to argue those merits. You can't just go, well, they do something like this in Europe, we will also do it. Great, they put fucking maple sauce on pancakes in America, so should all American players have free maple sauce at the house? What is even the relevance of this? How is this going to accomplish anything? Now then, like I said, you can definitely argue the merits of best of 3 and best of 2, as I already did before. Now, what do I think the actual effects of this will be? Well, first of all, I do actually think this should help the Western teams when it comes to Worlds and international tournaments like MSI, etc., because they'll have draft adaptation where when something goes wrong in game 1 or even in game 2, you can fix it in game 3. If you won one of the first 2, you can start to adapt there. You'll sort of draft when you play more than one game. It's sort of like error checking for what you're doing in your system. Whereas if if you play one game, sometimes you won't know, was it the draft that fucked us? Did we not know how to play that out? We have multiple chances to play out these particular comps we might want to draft, or learn how to ban against someone on the fly. Will also help you see who sucks as a player faster, because you get to see them play against the same opponent a couple of times. You'll really get a better gauge on how good they are. I mean, way less cheese bullshit. Sorry, Keen and Tip. No, it's Gravity using, actually. That we won't have that bullshit, because first of all, you won't be able to always get the side where you can counterpick in the only game, like Gravity someone magically did, so Keen won't be able to do that. Secondly, there'll be 2 games, so if he does something sick, either we can ban it, or he has to replicate it over 2 games, and we'll see actually how good players like him are, and people who want to do cheese. KKs, etc. Now, in terms of the NLCS having a 3-day schedule with 1 on Friday and 2 on Saturday, and EULCS having the 2 days with the dual stream, first and foremost, again, it should always have been this way. I mean, what's funny is I'll now use sports to counter Riot's argument. Are you ready for that? Oh, God. Imagine if they won't like the taste of this medicine. Anyway, so in sports, if you think of the way sports are broadcasted and the way fans consume them, most fans I know of any sport do not sit down and try to watch every game in the league. What they do is they have certain teams they follow, maybe one team only. Sit down and watch that team and then they're out. Or they watch that team and then the big game of the day. Or they watch a couple of games in a row because they're watching on a Sunday, but nobody can watch all the sports. And that's why in those particular areas, they know that and they double up and they have dual streams and they have different channels, get different games, and they have games going on all at once so everyone can play in a good format even though you can't watch every game. It's only Riot for some weird reason, again, presumably due to some logic like before, like we wanted to grow all of the brands, that they sort of made you sit through dog shit games to get to other games because every game had to be shown on stream sequentially and every team had to play on every day, and you couldn't ever have a time when 2 games were going on at once and you could choose which game you want to play, or God forbid, you know, in real television you can go back and TiVo it and go back and watch the game. Imagine if there was a sort of VOD or something, you could do that in League of Legends. Yeah, imagine. But there is, so you can do that here. So again, this is good. I think it's better that Riot's gone to this dual stream format. Again, props for doing it, but don't be too self-congratulatory, because again, this should have been the way it always was. I never understood. In fact, every time I argued with people from Riot about format issues, they would always come with stuff like this. Yeah, but how would I structure it? And I'd go, well, there's your premise that's wrong immediately. Why do I have to watch every game? Why can't I just skip out on the games I don't want to watch, or watch a specific team and double up, and then it'll fix a lot of the formatting issues? They weren't willing to look into it, but now they have, and now it's got to make things look a lot better. Now, in terms of... And notice again, I argued the merits of doing it that way, not just that it was done in sports, because I don't pray to, what was it called, Stern Goodman, or whatever the fuck that right Rito god was. So what are the solutions to this? I mean, if I had to make an equal one, I don't mind, by the way, different leagues having different formats. I mean, China and Korea have different formats. I certainly don't understand the logic, though, of giving Europe best of 2 and giving NA best of 3. As in, I can't still see a merit beyond that cultural bullshit one, which doesn't flower me because it didn't explain the benefits of why Europeans would like it, as to why you wouldn't just give EU best of 3 as well. Especially since I think if you argue the merits, that's probably the better one overall. Or give both best of 2. Best of 2 has its own benefits, and then no one's missing out and no one's feeling denied. I mean, by this logic, if Europeans like ties and it's accepting more, then why aren't Europeans loving this league? Like, I mean, I don't think the original logic really follows in this particular sense. And again, it's not a sport. It's an esport, and we have them shown in different ways and consumed in different ways. People love sports. They'd probably be off watching sports now, mate. So, considering all the circumstances, if I had to do in terms of format, I'd have probably picked either best of 3 for both or best of 2 for both. I mean, best of 2's fine as well. Still gives a lot better variety than best of 1, has a lot of the advantages ironed out. In fact, I like best of 2 in terms of the fact you play one game on each side, you have a chance to adapt, and then the playoffs still are the big series, but it probably helps you better to prepare for real series and international tournaments to play best of 3s, so you can go either way on either side of them. Now then, if you want to have a Riot, and you want this experience to be based on traditional sports, and yet to be a satisfying change, are you ready for that? And to be able to do it in EU and A and have fun with both, you probably want to play Alpha Draft, where they have a fantasy esports service that's based on traditional fantasy esports, daily fantasy esports over in traditional sports, but in a way that makes sense because it works in esports, doesn't fuck with any of the physical aspects because it's fantasy, and you can play and win at all different levels, all different games, all different esports games actually. So, alphadraft.com.